Penguin Random House Audio presents The First Wave, the D-Day Warriors Who Led the Way to Victory in World War II, by Alex Kershaw. Read for you by Paul Michael. For John Snowden. Part 1. Twilight of the Idols. When you talk about combat leadership under fire on the beach at Normandy, I don't see how the credit can go to anyone other than the company-grade officers and senior NCOs who led the way. It is good to be reminded that there are such men, that there always have been, and always will be. We sometimes forget, I think, that you can manufacture weapons and you can purchase ammunition, but you can't buy valor, and you can't pull heroes off an assembly line. Sergeant John Ellery, 16th Infantry Regiment, U.S. 1st Infantry Division. Chapter 1. June 5th, 1944. The clock in the war room at Southwark House showed 4 a.m. The 9 men gathered in the 25 by 50-foot former library, its walls lined with empty bookshelves, were anxiously sipping cups of coffee, their minds dwelling on the Allies' most important decision of World War II. Outside in the darkness, a gale was blowing, angry rain lashing against the windows. The weather was terrible, recalled 53-year-old Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower. Southwark House was shaking. Oh, it was really storming. Given the atrocious conditions, would Eisenhower give the final go-ahead, or postpone? He had left it until now, the very last possible moment, to decide whether or not to launch the greatest invasion in history. Seated before Eisenhower in upholstered chairs at a long table covered in a green cloth were the commanders of Overlord. The no-nonsense Missourian General Omar Bradley, commander of U.S. ground forces. The British General Bernard Law Montgomery, commander of the 21st Army Group, casually attired in his trademark roll-top sweater and corduroy slacks. Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, the naval commander who had orchestrated the miracle of Dunkirk, the evacuation of more than 300,000 troops from France in May 1940. The pipe-smoking Air Chief Arthur Tedder, also British. Air Chief Marshal Sir Trafford Lee Mallory, whose blunt pessimism had caused Eisenhower considerable anguish, and Major General Walter Bedell Smith, Eisenhower's Chief of Staff. A dour and tall Scotsman, 43-year-old Group Captain James Stagg, Eisenhower's chief meteorologist, entered the library and stood on the polished wood floor before Overlord's commanders. He had briefed Eisenhower and his generals every 12 hours, predicting the storm that was now rattling the windows of the library, which had already led Eisenhower to postpone the invasion from June 5th to June 6th. Then, to Eisenhower's great relief, he had forecast that there would, as he had put it with a slight smile, be rather fair conditions, beginning that afternoon and lasting for 36 hours. Once more Stagg gave an update. The storm would indeed start to abate later that day. Eisenhower got to his feet and began to pace back and forth, hands clasped behind him, chin resting on his chest, tension etched on his face. What if Stagg was wrong? The consequences were beyond bearable, but to postpone again would mean that secrecy would be lost. Furthermore, the logistics of men and supplies, as well as the tides, dictated that another attempt could not be made for weeks, giving the Germans more time to prepare their already formidable coastal defenses. Since January, when he had arrived in England to command Overlord, Eisenhower had been under crushing, ever greater strain. Now it had all boiled down to this decision. Eisenhower alone, not Roosevelt, not Churchill, had the authority to give the final command to enter the continent of Europe, as his orders from on high had stated, and undertake operations aimed at the heart of Germany and the destruction of her armed forces. He alone could pull the trigger. Marshalling the greatest invasion in the history of war had been at times as terrifying as the very real prospect of failure. The last time there had been a successful cross-channel attack was 1066, almost a millennium ago. The scale of this operation had been almost too much to grasp. More than 700,000 separate items had formed the inventory of what was required to launch the assault. Dismissed by some British officers as merely a coordinator, a good mixer, the blue-eyed Eisenhower, celebrated for his broad grin and easy charm, had nevertheless imposed his will, working 18-hour days, reviewing and tweaking plans to launch some 7,000 vessels, 12,000 planes, and 160,000 troops to hostile shores. Eisenhower had overseen vital changes to the Overlord plan. A third more troops had been added to the invasion forces, of whom fewer than 15% had actually experienced combat. Heeding General Montgomery's concerns, Eisenhower had ensured that the front was broadened to almost 60 miles of coast, with a beach codenamed Utah added at the base of the Cotentin Peninsula, farthest to the west. It had been agreed after Eisenhower had carefully managed the bunch of prima donnas, most of them British, who made up his high command, the men gathered now before him, that the attack by night should benefit from the rays of a late-rising moon. In addition, it was decided that the first wave of seaborne troops would land at low tide to avoid being ripped apart by beach obstacles. An elaborate campaign of counterintelligence and outright deception, Operation Fortitude, had hopefully kept the Germans guessing as to where and when the Allies would land, providing the critical element of surprise. Hopefully, Erwin Rommel, the field marshal in charge of German forces in Normandy, had not succeeded in fortifying the coast to the extent that he had demanded. Hopefully, the Allies' greatest advantage, their overwhelming superiority in air power, would make all the difference. Hopefully. Not even Eisenhower was confident of success. "We are not merely risking a tactical defeat," he had recently confided to an old friend back in Washington. "We are putting the whole works on one number." Among Eisenhower's most senior generals, even now at the 11th hour, there was precious little optimism. Still pacing, Eisenhower thrust his chin in the direction of Montgomery. He was all for going. So was Tedder. Lee Mallory, ever cautious, thought the heavy cloud cover might prove disastrous. Stagg left the library and its cloud of pipe and cigarette smoke. There was an intense silence. Each man knew how immense this moment was in history. The stakes could not be higher. There was no Plan B. Nazism and its attendant evils, barbarism, unprecedented genocide, the enslavement of tens of millions of Europeans, might yet prevail. The one man in the room whom Eisenhower genuinely liked, Omar Bradley, believed that Overlord was Hitler's greatest danger and his greatest opportunity. If the Overlord forces could be repulsed and trounced decisively on the beaches, Hitler knew it would be a very long time indeed before the Allies tried again, if ever. 6 weeks before, 5th Corps Commander General Leonard Gero had written to Eisenhower outlining grave doubts, even though it was too late to do much to alter the Overlord plan. It was distressingly clear, after the 4th Division had lost an incredible 749 men killed in a single practice exercise on April 28th on Slapton Sands, that the Royal Navy and American troops were not working well together. Apart from the appallingly chaotic practice landings, the woeful yet final dress rehearsals, the defensive obstacles sown all along the beaches in Normandy were especially concerning. Eisenhower had chided Gero for his skepticism. Gero had shot back that he was not being pessimistic, but simply realistic. And what of the 10 missing officers from the disaster at Slapton Sands, who had detailed knowledge of the D-Day operations, the most important secret in modern history? They knew about Hobart's funnies, the assortment of tanks specially designed to cut through Rommel's defenses, including flail tanks that cleared mines with chains, and DUKWs the six-wheeled amphibious trucks that would take rangers to within yards of the steep...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?